Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. The bad news is today is a bit gloomy, it's a bit wet and cold, and also I have ran out of razor blades. But the good news is the paint on the Beetle is now dry and we're ready to polish. So if you've just watched the previous video, you'll know that I have just painted this 67 Bug in some really terrible, dusty, dirty conditions. And now it's time to polish up this paint. And what I've just done is half a bonnet, just so I can show you the before and after and what I'm actually trying to achieve. And from a distance, it does look pretty good. It's got a nice bit of gloss there, and I do know that I've put quite a few heavy coats of paint on this. But if I look really closely, you can see that the reflection isn't quite perfect. It's a little bit mottly, a little bit orange peely, maybe a bit dusty in areas. It doesn't have that high gloss that I want. And this is the side of the bonnet that I have just polished up, and you can see that the reflection here is a lot better than on this side. So to achieve this kind of level of gloss compared to this gun finish side here, does require a bit more work. And if you really want to get your fresh paint smooth and shiny, well, it's got to be smooth to be shiny. So to do this, I need to wet flat the panels and then polish them up. I've actually already started on the roof here. You can see that it's got like a dull sheen. This is because I've already gone over it with my wet dry paper. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with this rear quarter panel here. I'm just going to go through the stages on how to get this really nice and shiny. So unfortunately, if you are painting in these conditions, there may be some contaminants in the paint. Hopefully it's just on the top layer, and these can easily be flatted out and then polished, and you will delete them. You won't be able to see them after that. I don't know if you can see this at all, but there's little dots like this. This is actually dust on top of the paint, and what we can do is we can rub these out and get rid of them completely and then polish it. And if this is your first time painting a car or anything, you may find that there are sags in the paint or runs and things like that, but providing you put enough paint on, you should be able to delete these at this stage. And also another thing that's worth noting is when I was painting the car, I did go round and do the edges first. The edges do tend to be thinner on the paints than on the flat panels, so just be aware if you're doing a lot of wet flatting, you may end up going through the edges, but providing you put enough paint on there, that's not going to happen. So the first thing I'm going to do is I've got my bucket of water ready, and I'll be using this here, which is 2000 wet dry paper. You can start with 2000 or 2500, it's totally up to you. Bucket of water, and also if you want, you can just put a little dollop of washing up liquid in your bucket of water. It will help the paper glide a bit better when you're flatting it. So I'm just going to go ahead and wet flat this panel using my 2000. Make sure you use a block. Do not use your hand. You will leave finger marks in the paint if you do that. Also, if you hear any scratchy noises of any grit that's in between the paper and the paint, make sure you thoroughly wash your paper and the panel down. Any bits of grit can actually be a little bit more coarse, and you'll end up leaving marks in the paint, and it's a little bit more difficult to polish those out. So I've just lightly wet flatted this panel just so I could show you what you're trying to achieve when wet flatting. And it really is a little bit difficult to see here, but Areas like this here, you can see that there's a little bit of chod, and you can actually see that there's a gloss left over here. I want to be able to delete the gloss part and any high spots, including any bits of dust. That needs to be totally flatted off the panel. So after wet flattening this panel and drying it off, it should look, well, dull. So dull and flat, but with no obvious imperfections in the paint. And at this point you could go ahead and start polishing it up. But I prefer just to go that little bit extra, just so I can get a better shine by moving on to 3000 grit wet dry paper. So when it comes to larger flat panels, I have no problem with using the DA sander. This one I've just put a 3000 grit wet dry paper on. But bear in mind, don't use your best DA sander, as it will be getting wet and these can easily get chodded up. So make sure you use a relatively budget one, not your favorite one. And the logic here is that a 3000 grit paper is going to be easier to polish the scratches out than a 2000 grit. And another thing, if you are using a DA sander and it does pick up a little bit of grit in the paper, you will end up leaving little swirl marks called pigtails in the paint, which can also be difficult to polish out. But if you are worried about that, what you can do is DA sand the area, and then you can just go over it with a block afterwards and then polish it. So you could go a little bit further on the grade of the paper, but I find something like a 3000 is actually good enough. There's also a special pad you can use on a DA. It's called an Abralon pad. I don't have one here to show you, but it's pretty good. It's a soft foam pad with a grit. You can use it on a DA wet, and it really does help just to flat those panels off. So once we're happy with the panel, it's time to actually put the shine back into the paint, and to do so I will be using a polishing machine. This is a relatively budget one. The colour was actually chosen by my wife, so if you do see her, it is the best colour in the world. I will be using a couple of different heads on this polisher. Unfortunately, what I did is I did order some pads and another backing plate for the polishing machine. That doesn't actually fit, so I will be using pads that are too large for the machine to do this job. So there's quite a few different types of polishing pads out there. These are just a generic one picked up at the local car shop. The yellow one is a quite a hard sponge, whereas a orange one here is a medium one. So what I'll be doing first is using quite a hard sponge with some polishing compound. And at the local car shop, there wasn't a huge amount of compounds available for me to pick up. In the UK, I was using a product called Raw, another one called Freckler. There was 3M polishing compound as well. All of those were super good. The one I've got is Pixel. I don't really know much about this, but apparently it can polish out scratches 1500 to 2000 grit, so this will probably do the job. But more importantly, I've chosen a compound that's silicone and wax free. And the reason I've done this is that I've got some more things to paint in this workshop, and I really don't want any bits of wax and silicone in the air at all, because what that can do is find its way onto your next paint job, and you're going to have all sorts of problems with fisheyes from silicones and reactions and everything. So I'm playing it safe. I've gone for a wax-free, silicone-free compound, and yeah, let's see what it does. And when polishing, and you're using quite a large polishing machine or a mop, you may find that there are some areas that are really difficult to get to. If you remember in previous videos, I was using this little sanding tool for doing a little bits of prep work on the body shell, and what I've done is I've just changed the backing plate there and just put a polishing head on. So I'm going to go ahead and polish this panel up. There's a couple of things you need to know about. If you do decide to use this dry with the compound, you can experience a burn through on the paint. So what I tend to do is I like to just use the sponge on the polishing mop slightly wet, and then use the compound as well, and slowly and surely wins the race. And it's just the case of polishing the scratches out of the panel. And if you are successful in doing so, what you'll end up with is a super smooth, super shiny surface. So when it comes to doing the doors, the hinge areas here and this part here are a little bit tricky to get to if it's bolted on. So what you can do is do these bits first, or you can do the whole door, then bolt it on. So when it comes to polishing up the wings, I do find these a bit fiddly. They do tend to flap around a bit on the panel stands. In the past, I've used zip ties to hold these in place while I've flat and polished them. But what I prefer to do is just concentrate on this edge here that bolts to the car first, get that flatted and polished, then bolt it back onto the car and then flat and polish the rest. So if you do decide to use sanding tools like these when doing this initial sanding before the polishing, just something that's worth mentioning is these yellow hard backing plates that are fitted to these. If these actually touch areas on the paint like this here, you could actually burn through the paint and damage it. And if you're using a polishing machine or mop like this one here, I personally use these at quite high speed, but if you're not very confident, I recommend start at a slow speed and just see how you get on. And what you're trying to do is just remove as many visible scratches as possible. And I have mentioned this, but I am going to mention it again, is edges like this here and down here and across the door. These tend to be relatively thin, so you can actually sand through these or polish through these. So just be very careful with just on the edges of the paint. Another thing when using the machine to polish, I sometimes do take these pads off and I give them a little bit of a wash. The compound can clog these up, and when they're really clogged or very worn, just replace them. But also something that's worth mentioning, I sometimes use water. I find that it does glide better with a bit of water, but this is electric and you could get electrocuted. So just be wary of that. If you want to keep the panel wet, just to keep it cooler, perhaps use a spray bottle with water in. So polishing compound can be messy stuff, but using a damp cloth afterwards, make sure you try and remove as much as you can. When compound goes dry, it's really difficult to remove, so best do that now. So this whole process of flattening and polishing can take a very long time. In fact, I've probably put 3.5 days into this already, probably coming up to 4 days. I haven't quite finished the bonnet yet. So it really was a case of just nibbing out the imperfections and then maybe going back over it again until I was happy that I got a decent shine out of the panel. And so far, the only product I've really been using is this here, and it's a polishing compound. But to be honest, I wish I went for a slightly coarser grade of compound. This is actually taking quite a while to remove the scratches and swirl marks out of the paint. But as with everything like this, you can actually get a better shine by using polishes and waxes. I mean, there's tons of them out there, and you can really get your paint job shining with these. But I don't want to be using waxes and products that have a lot of silicons in at this point, because I will have to be doing a little bit more painting in the workshop, and those particles can end up in your new paint and ruin it. But just by using the compound and the polishing mop, this thing is really starting to shine. So if you've been watching this video series, I did spend a lot of time on the bodywork, making sure the panels were as straight as I could get them. And this is really important, as any dents or any imperfections in the bodywork stage will actually show in the paint. So best spend a little bit more time on the bodywork stage before you paint it, and then hopefully your polishing will come out really well. So I still need to finish the bonnet off, but I'm a bit reluctant to bolt it on right now. I will need to put the body back on the chassis, which does mean I have to then remove the bonnet again, and I haven't ordered a bonnet seal yet, so I'll probably leave that just for a little bit longer. I have bolted the wings on. I do find it easier to polish the inside edges first off the car, and then I polish the wing when it's on the car. It stops it wiggling about and could fall off the panel stand. So although I've bolted the doors on, I do tend to flatten polish these on the stands. I haven't quite finished the insides yet. I don't mind doing these while they're bolted onto the car. And also what I need to do is just nib off areas of the inside of the doors here. I mean, the majority of it is covered by a door card. And at the same time, I do need to just flatten polish this dash area. Areas like underneath the dash area, heater channels, and this whole rear section, and including these pillars, I don't actually need to touch. So although I painted this whole area in the back, a lot of it will be covered up. It will have soundproofing, carpet, and the headlining. It pretty much covers everything, but I wanted to put a bit of paint underneath these areas just to protect it from rust. And it's the same story underneath the wheel arches. I'm not going to bother flattening and polishing any of this. I'm actually going to leave it gun finish. It looks pretty smart anyway, but the paint here should protect anything underneath, stop any rust coming through. Underneath the bonnet area as well, I'm not really going to put any extra work into it. I'm just going to leave it a gun finish. I mean, maybe there's a couple of little imperfections that I might want to polish out, but other than that, I'm pretty happy with the way it looks like that. And also in the engine bay area, I won't really be putting any extra work into here. It has a good coat of paint on there to protect it. There's going to be a firewall that sits over the back here and down these sides, so you won't actually see any of that. Another thing you may have noticed, I did leave the masking in on the window areas while I was polishing. The compound does tend to go everywhere, and that was just to stop too much crud building up on the inside of the car. So it really is a whole heap of work just trying to get this thing really shiny. But the thing is, it is worth it. The more effort you put in at this point, the better the shine will be and the better the end product will be once it's all finished. So what I need to do now is I need to go off and order some rubber seals for things like the rear light holders, number plate light, boot and bonnet seals, things like that. Also, I need to think about getting the body back on the pan shortly. So I'm gonna have to order some bits for that, like the body to chassis pan seal. So I'm gonna go off and do that. Thanks as always for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers! God, check out that epic beard. I'm gonna go buy some razors.